Hi folks, welcome to the Team Topologies Stream of Teams live stream. Matthew Skelton here, co-author of the book Team Topologies, and it's holiday season, so I'm wearing a proper Christmassy jumper like this, at least for you folks that are in the Northern Hemisphere. Those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, enjoy your time on the beach. I kind of am slightly jealous, to be totally honest. It'd be nice to be there. Anyhow, let's crack on. So today's session is focused on enabling teams. And I'll introduce my guest in a second or two. There's just a few things to cover off first. As ever, I'll share my screen actually. Here we go. Present. God, how do I even do this? Here we go. Share screen. Entire screen. So we'll be talking about enabling teams in a little bit, which is here. Talking about this stuff in a bit. For now, just to emphasize the Team Topologies community, community.teamtopologies.com is where it's at. There's lots of stuff happening there, lots of really, really good discussions going on. And just to highlight a couple of them, there's a really cool theme here from Alish, who's talking about leadership as a platform. This is something that Manuel introduced, my co-author. He introduced it at a Fastball conference in London in September 2024. I mean, it's not the first time the idea of leadership is being a platform, really. There's the kind of servant leadership and that kind of thing before. But anyway, this concept, we're using Team Topologies terminology to talk about leadership. And I think this is a really nice way to think about it. What would it take for leaders to kind of be way more enabling and kind of make things available, self-service, to consume from other parts of the organization and so on? Quite a different shift in leadership model. We've actually got a case study coming soon from a consultancy based in Norway. That should get published in the next few weeks. So if you're watching this, watching the video, the live stream later, then that is almost certainly being published by the time you watch it. So look out for that. But I think the whole concept of like, what would it take for leadership to effectively provide self-service stuff and to act as like in an enabling way to improve the autonomy and outcomes for the streamlined teams across the organization. I think that's a really compelling concept there. I should say that so the last live stream, this was the previous live stream was all about effective machine learning teams. So we were talking to two of the three authors of that book. And what we did is to say that the most interesting post on the community, Team Topologies community, would get a free digital copy of the book. Actually, there ends up being two interesting posts, so we're actually going to provide two copies of the book. That's the effective machine learning teams, which is based on Team Topologies basically. So there's James here had a really there's an interesting point about machine learning and how we get to small frequent commits. So that was there's a ebook going to James, and there's another post further down here from Paris again. So those two people will get a free ebook via us. We'll sort that out in the next few weeks. Thank you for that. And we've got something similar coming from our guest today. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk to Eduardo. Hi, Eduardo, good to see you.
Hey, Matthew, great to see you. And hello, everyone.
So enabling teams is what we're talking about today. And obviously, like, it's a key concept in Team Topologies' book. I guess one thing I wanted to ask you is, like, were you using, we'll talk about what enabling teams are in a minute, obviously, but were you using this concept like before the Team Topologies book came out? Is this a thing that effectively you're already doing? I don't actually know. Like, I don't think I've even asked you that question before.
Yeah. No, I actually, I think I was like probably many people, right? And I often talk about this, like it just became much easier to talk about this with the language that Team Topologies brought in and positioned compared with the other types of teams. But yeah, I think I've been doing this for probably the last 10 years or so. A lot of work around enabling teams and sometimes I even use the word enabling thinking, because sometimes it's not just a team, but more the mindset of shifting towards more facilitating and helping, upskilling and addressing those missing capabilities in teams and in the organization. So yeah, definitely, yeah.
I just when back in 2013, when these DevOps topologies were published. So these are like the precursor, or not precursor, but like an inspiration for some of the team topology stuff.
Yeah.
And this is in the world of obviously of thinking about development and operations. That's what DevOps was back in the day. Like, how do we get these two groups to work better together? And this pattern here that came out then 20, what's that? That's 12 years ago, 11 and a half years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
This idea of a DevOps team with an expiry date. So like it has a sense of being temporary, and the idea was to bring together these two different groups. And I think that effectively, that's like a precursor to what we're really talking about in terms of enabling teams. Like that green team, that DevOps team in the middle, is not building anything itself necessarily, but it's facilitating, I guess we'd say now, a better way of working between these other two teams.
Yeah, definitely.
And so these kind of patterns were flying around in the DevOps kind of early cloud community, like 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising to me that you were doing that.
No, I think particularly on say smaller organizations, that some of this work happens rather easily, right? So you sort of talk with each other, etc. But then there is a given moment where we just need to have a more explicit focus and sometimes define these teams or these facilitation interactions with a clear mission of solving something that it's difficult for the teams on themselves to sometimes arrange or coordinate or get through, and sometimes you need that knowledge also to come from outside the organization. There are like many situations where it's beneficial to have the enabling team or that facilitation being more clearly defined. So yeah.
Let's dive into that a little bit more in a second. First of all, we should just give a little bit of background to you, and also to the video training course that you've done with Manuel on the academy as well, right?
Yeah.
So, like, what have you been up to? How do you think of your work? You've actually done some interesting study as well. It'd be great to just to get that kind of context as to why you've had a particular strong focus on enabling teams, right?
Yeah. So maybe just a quick background of myself. I'm an academic that turned startup founder, and then eventually I started actually getting more into being a software engineer, software architect in different companies. And again, as I said, like roughly 10 years ago, I started moving more towards doing more software architecture and working on scale-up companies. And I actually started then getting into these problems that are not necessarily part of a single team, and helping scaling certain capabilities in organizations. Maybe we can talk about some examples later, but for example, I was working in this scale-up company here in the Netherlands where I'm living, bol.com, and there we were helping at a given moment scale the data science in the organization, and that's one of the examples that I also talk in the video course. But there I started seeing the leveraging of what eventually you consolidate as enabling teams in the book as being very helpful, because you have so many. You start seeing like smells of things that multiple teams are lacking, or being skilled, or being even certain capabilities that eventually should be part of a platform, but we don't yet know. So there is that sort of that phase of seeing these things, and this is when I really started. So also I started working more cross teams, cross the whole organization, and that led to also start writing and talking a lot about these things. And and then So this was maybe 2017 or so, roughly, and then I think around 2021 we met. Also, I think Matthew was roughly when we met each other. Also, Manuel started collaborating, and fast forward. I think from May 2022, I started my independent consulting career. And since then, I've been working on topics related with this, but also some other enabling teams related, but also like architecture modernization, being the architecture practices, but also the actual modernization of the systems and the teams around them. And that's what is keeping me busy these days. So I still do that sort of work, and I'm really happy doing this because it's a really fascinating and I think still very challenging thing in many organizations. So yeah.
Let's talk about the academy. So you've got a course on there, haven't you, with Manuel?
Yes. Yeah. So
now, effective enabling teams, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
This one here.
Indeed.
So if you head to academy.teamsbodies.com and you look at the one called, the product code is TT28. It's called Effective Enabling Teams. Just give it a little taster. There's some videos online, aren't there? Actually on YouTube, I think some video tasters.
Yeah. There are already multiple videos, including the first part of the case study. This example of scaling data science.
This one. Yeah.
And basically what Manuel and I tried to do on this course was to get into the details of how first of all, what are enabling teams, right? So you described on the book, but there is a lot of things that you cannot go deep on the book, right? It's not just about enabling teams, the book. So we tried to provide some more introduction of what enabling teams are, but then we spend a lot of time on actually thinking about the journey of maturing enabling teams and adoption of enabling teams in organizations. So we have a part more on ideas to kickstart enabling teams, and then another one more on sort of growing them, but also measuring their impact in the organization, and then a last part more on scaling, which is when you are more enabling teams and enabling thinking is more common in your organization. Like how can you actually start adopting more advanced patterns of leveraging enabling teams?
It can be a bit of a tricky ask for some organizations. You're saying, okay, we've got a team of experts here, and they're not building anything. Ooh, that sounds expensive. And that kind of mindset is like, well, fine, you could put them into other teams, but then you might be solving the same problem 74 times across the organization rather than actually detecting that and then doing something more effective. So, but for some organizations, it's quite, unless there's some, without the kind of guidance that you're giving here, and we'll talk about this a bit more in a minute, it can be difficult sometimes to justify that kind of input without the bigger picture, without the data, without the sense of the bigger whole.
Yes. It's very difficult, and that's why. So in the course we iterate this, but many times you just need to sort of start showing the value of leveraging enabling teams and that sort of mindset, right? So example of this company I talk in the course, I already mentioned this ball.com. We had roughly 150 teams when I left. So we were on the journey to go to cloud. This was roughly end of the 2010s. Many companies were doing that. You don't want to have 150 teams figuring out or like how we work effectively on cloud, or what are
it's incredibly, it's financially inefficient. You go to the CFO and you say, we've got 150 teams all trying to do the same thing without talking to each other. It's like, why would you do that? It makes no sense.
Exactly. And one can argue, okay, but we provide a platform, but the platform needs to learn, and we need to sort of be with the teams and see what are their problems. And that was something that was happened. So there initially, there was already a rather mature engineering culture, and this idea that it's okay to have some people that are more doing enabling work. But if you don't have that, and you just sort of allow everyone to be on their own, you can see that when you have this sort of bigger this size of organization, you will have a lot of in a sense a lot of waste, because you are not you may have, the people will learn from each other, obviously, but there is at a certain scale some facilitation of this learning, and having actually the people that already learned a lot about something sharing this or helping others. This is where I think this is why I often talk about enabling thinking, which is we may not always need to have an enabling team, but we can have some of these people if we provide them space to actually go and help others in problems that they know a lot about. This is like a big return on investment, because then you accelerate those teams to
Exactly.
learn and to be more effective faster.
It's a key part of the business context or the organizational context, right? Because the technology is changing hugely quickly. I mean, we saw that with cloud starting 15 odd years ago, and the technology there has evolved into like hugely quickly, and now we're seeing it even more quickly with generative AI in particular, and AI related tooling and approaches.
Yeah,
the speed of innovation there is getting more and more rapid, which is what we expect if we've got the awareness from things like Wardley mapping and so on and so on. We expect to see that innovation speeding up because we're building on the low level primitives. And also regulation. Regulation is increasing in order to deal with the arguably the more harmful aspects of some, or harmful ways in which the technology could be used. So the regulation is increasing, the business complexity is increasing, the technology complexity is increasing, or the options available are increasing. And so the amount of learning we need to do is also increasing, and then we're expecting the organization to have varying different levels of awareness across the organization. Like how do you can't coordinate that. You can't get everyone to take the same training course and get to the same level of understanding across the organization at the same time. It's just completely impractical. So then what's a deliberate approach, a deliberate and shareable approach to getting that kind of awareness, and that's what you're sharing in the academy course, right?
Yeah, and this is also where we also talk about that in the course, but in general, some things that I started also doing some work on is like there is a shift also on, so what you were just talking about, right? So the way we architect in organizations, and this is why I think architecture and the ideas of enabling teams is something that I think most organizations can should be paying some attention, which is how can we, given that we are moving so fast, things are changing so fast around us, how can you enable teams to basically be able to architect the things that they are doing, but in many cases they may require some support. They are lacking something, and then this is where you can connect ideas from enabling teams to see how can we facilitate that rapid learning of something that the team is missing, but also on the sense that what traditionally would be the architects that sometimes are in these bigger organizations are sitting outside of the teams, how can they behave more like an enabling architect, if you will? I use this expression a few times. Like how do we position architecture across the organization so that we can sense where things are where you have those challenges emerging, and sometimes the team, if the team can solve this, okay, great. The team goes and does this. But when you start seeing the example of cloud that I was mentioning, many teams struggling to actually start doing this and spending weeks figuring out things. What did we do? Well,
they spend weeks figuring out things, partly because it's exciting to do it yourself. but actually, and it's
Also,
kind of like some
also,
local optimization. But
yeah,
actually, at an organizational level, we can't actually have 75 out of 100 teams all doing the same
yeah,
investigation,
yeah,
even if it might be exciting for those people doing it. So there's
yeah,
a
yeah,
bit of
yeah,
a tension there in terms of like individual like learning
yeah,
career progression
exploration, yeah,
versus
yeah,
actually organizational outcomes, and
yeah.
enabling teams can help to kind of actually address that very practical problem.
But that's very interesting, Matthew, because so you can imagine, for example, in the case I was talking about, we could imagine, okay, let's first help everyone to deploy their first application in the cloud. That could be a first exercise to get everyone through an end-to-end experience of actually getting through that learning and something new. And then once you are on cloud and your for example, your applications require a certain cloud feature that no one is using, that team will explore, right? And they are learning that skill, that how they should be doing that. And then you can imagine that they themselves can become later enablers for other teams that soon will require that skill. So it's like
I think we should model that out. I think it becomes like a flywheel, right? I think we should model
exactly.
it out in Miro in a minute or two, and like take that as a very real a real situation. But we can apply it to cloud, we can apply it to generative AI, a bunch of other things. So we'll do that in a minute.
Yeah.
But you've got a discount code for your academy course, right? Eduardo 15
Yes.
off.
Yeah.
50% off the academy course. So that's cool. I'll put the link in. I'll put the link in the comments. So like for those of you watching, feel free to just go ahead and use that code right now. That'll give you 15% off the academy course. Is it just the one course, or is it all the courses?
I think this is only for my course.
It's certainly for yours, right?
But I'm
so
not
anyway,
100% sure, to be honest. Now that you asked,
you could try it for the other courses too. If it gives you 15% off, brilliant. All good. I'll just hide that one. Okay. I thought I'd do a quick rip through some what's in my head. What was in my head? This is not necessarily in the Teams Bodies book, but enabling teams, the focus is like improving flow and diffusing practices, and I think that combination is a nice way to kind of frame it. We need to diffuse the practices because the practices are changing a lot and the technology is changing a lot, and so on and so on. Oops, where is it here? And this is where the Teams Bodies diagram style probably we need to do some work on this in 2025 maybe, but like update how we show this kind of dynamics. It starts off looking, this is a picture from the book. It starts off, we've got an interaction there with a streamlined team. But then we've got a sense in which we've learned something. We've learned that there's a gap in that across multiple different streamlined teams. And so we need to bring that awareness out to, for example, HR or learning development or the skills development part of the organization. There's a sense in which there's information flowing out to a different part of the organization like that. Like that's part of the purpose. It's valuable to be able to somehow articulate that. I mean, this diagram sort of shows it, but I don't know. Is the diagram style a bit clunky? I don't know. Maybe it is. But it's something that kind of feels to me quite important that we're able to represent by the purpose of that team is doing that. There's information flows going somewhere else, basically.
Yeah.
And then there was a similar thing here where we've detected that there's a need to update something in the platform. Again, that information flow is kind of coming down from the enabling team, and kind of it ends up in the platform saying, hey, actually the way this API is working or the way this service is working is not optimal. It needs to be improved, or we've got a completely missing capability. We need to provide that somehow, or something else. I don't know. I think there's another diagram somewhere here. Oh, this gets even more interesting, where the enabling team then is aware of different interaction modes between different teams, and so is able to kind of work out, are these interaction modes working well? Like, is this collaboration working well with the streamlined team and the complicated subsystem team? Does that tell us anything? Does it tell us anything about the fact that the other streamlined team can consume something as a service? Like, it's able to start to reason about those kind of things too, and looking across the organization. So, like, this particular interaction is working really well. This one's working less well, or this is telling us something that's useful for across the whole organization. But I mean, maybe this diagram style works fine, but yeah. I'm just wondering whether there's probably additional diagramming that's valuable to like overlay like we've done here.
Yeah, sometimes I use I don't know, some other icons to represent these different, for example, the level of a certain skill that the enabling team is focusing on, and showing that on the different teams. That can be one. But something interesting that you are talking about there, Matthew, and just maybe as a, which is something that we I started also, and this connects with the architects discussion I had before, which is what we may have in organizations is also this idea of I called it structural enabling teams. So some enabling teams may actually be long-lived. We could imagine architects or engineering managers having more this a positioning of being there in the architecture and looking for those the interactions, but also the cognitive load of the teams and all of that.
Actively looking. This is the point. Like it's a
actively looking.
choice, right?
Yeah. So
exactly.
and then that can inform I don't know evolution of interactions, but also evolution of teams. Looking for those awkwardness that may lead to the blockers to flow, right? That we can like what you're showing, maybe certain things that the enabling teams, the teams are the stream-aligned teams are doing. Now we see that multiple of them are actually trying to solve that thing that is not really core to their activities, but they need to do it to actually bring their product to life. Okay, maybe this should be eventually consolidated in a platform. So as the organization develops that muscle in a sense, you can accelerate some of those some of that evolution. Otherwise it probably happens, but it may be much more accidental in a sense, right?
You can kind of start to show this, right? The basic enabling pattern is we start off with like a few streamlined teams. Maybe there's some kind of platform involved. I mean, these days we'd either call it a platform or
these diagrams are a bit older.
Grouping. We are moving forward to using different terminology from 2025 platform grouping. Anyway, so this is where it starts out, and these teams the streamlined teams are independent to start with. But then, I think it starts to get a bit difficult for this streamlined team here. It's thunder and lightning. It's a bit awkward. What's going on? Who knows? Like whatever the problem is, that there's some difficulty. And the enabling team is then in here, sort of detecting things. In this particular case here, it's detecting that this streamlined team at the bottom, they're on code red effectively. Like it's very tricky for them for whatever reason. They've also detected that the team at the top is hitting some snags. The team in the middle is fine for now. We can keep them independent. We don't need to interact with them at all.
And there it was just one of the examples we already talked about, right? So this could be an example of both teams struggling with cloud, migrating to cloud, right? So you could imagine that such an enabling team would be facilitating these teams on learning some of the things they need to do. And then this thing down here is very interesting, because then what you effectively can do is also from those learnings, firsthand problems that multiple stream-aligned teams have, and the things that we probably figured out with them, so we can consolidate them here on the X as a service, right? So in the future, other teams can benefit from those learnings, those insights.
Those learnings. Well, and services eventually, the cloud enabling team has detected that at least maybe only 3 teams are shown here, but maybe there's 20 teams. They detect that 17 teams all have got similar kind of problems, or there's maybe a cluster of problems. They detected that quickly, effectively, before we've detected it as soon as it becomes apparent, effectively. Then we can then feed into the platform and say, look, we need some kind of service around this thing, or we need a better way of doing this thing over here, and then people in the platform can go, okay, that's really useful input. right, that makes a lot of sense. Let's build this thing. Let's build this in a different way. Let's improve the user experience around this other thing, whatever it is.
Yep.
That's the typical pattern, isn't it?
Yep. It is.
Yeah. Right. What else do we have? So this is from a talk that Eduardo and I gave. When did we give it? 2021, right? 2022.
This was already 2021. That's why the naming is. I forgot to update the platform grouping.
Yeah.
Maybe on the second one, Matthew, if you follow me, that's an interesting one, which I think it's often people sometimes think, okay, the enabling team must exist beforehand or must be there waiting for to always detect the challenge and then work on it. But in fact, I think the most effective way is that you have ways of detecting. So we could imagine those, like we already mentioned, the engineering managers or the architects, or I don't know, a community of practice around cloud or a community of practice around testing, whatever. They are seeing that, okay, hey, actually we have multiple of our teams struggling with something, right? So say these two teams are effectively struggling and spending their cognitive load is very high because they have to deal with these with something that like a missing capability or could be skills. And
it's actually in the interest of all of those teams for a temporary enabling team to come together and help to solve it, right?
Yes, and we can argue that if this is something that these teams are exploring, right? These two teams are exploring, and they are trying to figure out how could we solve this, right? We could say, okay, maybe actually the people say let's imagine this would be about performance testing on clouds. This is new, the same example, and they are actually we could say, okay, then let's come together. We are both of our teams are trying to figure that thing out. Let's come together. Let's also maybe bring these two other I don't know, architects or this could be even be external consultants, whatever. Let's come together. Let's form the enabling team, and then this could be also where we figure out how to handle that skill, but could also be how we identify what would be something that eventually could become part of a platform or could be something else. So this is a very like leveraging the experts that or the people that are pioneering certain explorations from the Streamline teams is for me it's a very strategic move that we should make. It shouldn't be just these I don't know, architects or staff plus that tend to work more cross organization, because these people here in red, they are firsthand seeing the problems and trying to solve this on their own applications, their own scope. So if we can leverage their firsthand learning as a way to bring that in and then help others or see what should be the platform thing that we should be building. For me, this is a very strategic move to leverage enabling teams.
We got a sense of a more global optimization. There's something that we're going to focus on, which is bigger than just a single team. And we're keeping ourselves aware of that and using expertise at the right point, and we're using expertise in the right way. So someone from this team at the top here, Streamline team at the top, they're not going to build anything for the Streamline team at the bottom. They're going to act in an enabling and facilitating. Acting in a facilitating way. They're bringing their expertise from somewhere else and facilitating that awareness in the other team. And we'll probably get some learning back in the opposite direction because they'll be focused on slightly different things, or they've discovered slightly different problems. The enabling team is not there to build stuff for these Streamline teams. We're uplifting the capability in across all the cases there. We've got that mindset in place. And it just helps with that, because we've got the language and the patterns and the mindset in place. If we decide, so these people can come together and say, like, we're going to act as an enabling team for the next week, then they know when they're working with that enabling team hat on, they shouldn't be building something for somebody else. So we've got that sense of like the roles and the behavior that goes along with it is avoids things getting too tangled. It avoids a responsibility getting all blurred and so on,
Yes.
which to me feels really important.
Yeah. But that's I think one of the most challenging things around enabling teams, Matthew. They're actually the 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 the, the people feeling okay or being incentivized to actually take that step very organically. People coming together and trying to do something. That's very. I had this discussion with a client this week. It's for people on the teams. The natural thing is to focus on their product features, right? So this is our product. We keep on solving this. So it's important to sort of emphasize and incentivize that it's okay to be being part of this work with this work with other people from other teams that are suffering from the same. So here I think where communities of practice, events where you have internal events where people see each other's challenges and see, okay, hey, let's jump into let's try to solve this together and see how to exactly that's this foundation we also had here on our talk, Matthew, like mature the engineering culture, high level of trust. This is essential for this to work.
Lots of different things we can, we're expecting to detect new approaches that work. We can expect to facilitate some group learning events like talks and workshops and conferences and things like this, like across the teams, because we want to detect the good practices straight away. We want to, this team over here, I had no idea you were working on that thing. That's amazing. Look what you've done. Can we bring that in and share it with other teams so that we can be more effective and we're reducing our cognitive load and so on and so on. Understand better when to introduce new services and all that stuff. Helping to nurture, like, as you said, communities of practice and guilds and things like that. Feels that's a whole separate topic, actually. But let's not talk about avoiding standardization now. That's a whole separate thing. But anyway, this sense of like bringing together perspectives from across the organization in a way which does not blur the stewardship boundaries of the
it's for me this is the biggest like one of the biggest maybe blockers is too strong of a word, but like things that tend to actually limit a bit of this application of enabling teams. And I always, so what one of my recommendations is engineering manager or like the people manager that tends to exist in the organization. There must be a strong incentive to actually to make very explicit that we want you to actually do this. We incentivize you. It's part of your it can even be highlighted on what many organizations do, the performance reviews, right? So this should be something that it's not like a voluntary thing that we do if we have time, and if that's not there, the incentives are not there, it becomes very difficult for people to
it's very deliberate,
right? Although people want to do that, it just the incentives are not aligned to that, then it becomes difficult for them to take part of this, or even to take initiative and lead these things. That's even more difficult.
The way I see it is like a garden or something like this, and you need the gardeners there to look for the weeds, look for the problems, look for the fact that you've got a particular kind of insect that's causing problems in the garden, and they can take action to kind of deal with that stuff. But if you're just focused on a single part of the garden, you wouldn't see the more holistic problems, and that's a key aspect of enabling teams.
Yeah. I think we have a question
talking about your
also, Matthew.
There's a question.
There is a question on the chat from Anand. Maybe we can spend a moment on that.
Manuel says nice sweater. Thank you, Manuel. That's very kind.
Always on point, Manuel.
So Anand is saying, let's just show this now.
Okay.
Anand is saying how to optimize interactions across enabling teams like cloud and AI. It's interesting. It depends what that means exactly.
Exactly.
Maybe Anand, just expand on that a little bit, because it may well be that you've got separate enabling teams, and then you're trying to work out how to bring that stuff together. that we can talk about that aspect.
Yeah.
So let's say you got one enabling team which is focused on cloud and one that's focused
Yeah.
on AI, which
I
is
would
reasonable because
assume
those
I
are.
would assume that too. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's true because those two things are. There's some similarity clearly, but there's also quite a lot of difference between them. And so
Yeah.
you've got two different groups of specialists, and you're thinking about how they interact together, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you could,
Is it?
Anand, you could imagine if this is so. If the assumption that Matthew is the framing Matthew is positioning, we could imagine that those two enabling teams are also talking often. And for example, nowadays a lot of AI related things are actually coming from cloud, right? Cloud providers give you a lot of those services, so I would imagine those two teams to actually work very closely with each other, so they could have regular, um, if you will, like collaborations also, like to figure out some things that, say, the AI enabling team is trying to help teams with, but they are struggling concerning to the cloud infrastructure provisioning. So uh, they may figure some of those things out, and eventually those things can be, for example, I have this as a first hand example. So on the company I was working with, I was helping scaling data science, and one of the key things was adopting new data science related cloud products. So machine learning, in this case was Google GCP, so the Google Cloud, and we were the ones pioneering what would be the things together with the teams, figuring out what would be the things that we need in cloud, and then we would have sort of collaboration, temporary collaborations, as in team topologies, to figure out, okay, what do we need actually to be configuring on the core cloud infrastructure, because the that's something that, say, cloud enabling team, but also eventually cloud platform is adjusting or evolving in time based on those needs. So it was not like everything was open from day one. We were exploring from data science. You could imagine probably similar to AI, and then that collaboration, close collaboration, would end up being part of of the the cloud provisioning
I mean,
platform.
the other thing you can do is to blend the skills inside the enabling team, right? So instead of being a cloud enabling team like it is in here, you actually deliberately bring in some AI expertise into there as well. So you do the same thing at the same time, and then that group of people then has got a blend
Could
that enabling
be,
team's got a blend of skills. There's no
could be.
reason to keep it single skilled inside the enabling team, and that's what the example in the Teach Apologies book actually talks about. So page 88 in chapter 5, it's engineering enabling team within a large legal organization, and the composition of skills inside that team. They've got all kind of different skills inside there. People like engineers and testers and infrastructure people and so on and so on. So the example literally inside the Team's Bodies book actually has
Yeah,
that mix of skills deliberately because we need to tackle like kind of multiple things at the same time.
that can happen. But I think there will be some situations, Matthew, where I think those could be that two enabling teams are very focused on more specific, say, more AI
Yeah,
or data
yeah,
science and
yeah,
cloud. I think there is value also on having their having they can have these more very clear missions on helping on those two things in separate, and they benefit from being more say autonomous in a sense most
yeah,
of the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But then they know of each other, and they know that this is very interesting, because that really happened to me very firsthand. So I knew that there were these people who were there trying to improve cloud, and I would just have regular meetings with them. At a given moment we had like weekly alignment moments where we would sit down and just talk about, okay, what are the key things we would need to that are
Yeah,
emerging from data science that we should
yeah.
actually be starting to bring in place in cloud. Oh, okay, cool. And
If you do some talks and workshops
yeah, yeah, yeah,
conferences and so on and so on, like community
yes,
around these things,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
making sure the organization is providing time,
yeah,
space, like physical
yes.
space if necessary, maybe food as well to bring people together,
Yeah,
particularly if you're working partly remotely. Like actually pay for some food so people have a reason to come into the office and share it with other people, and then we'll do some talks and learning and things. And suddenly
yes, yes.
you're
That
enhancing,
that's
hugely enhancing the awareness
very helpful into creating these bridges and yeah.
uh, at the risk of being accused of being a salesperson. There's this book here which I wrote before the Teams Buddies book came out, which is in like internal tech conferences. I wrote it with Victoria Morgan Smith, so based on my work of running internal conferences inside organizations, and there's a particular way to run those conferences, which is actually really, really kind of opinionated but really valuable. So internaltechconf.com will get you to that book there, internal tech conferences. And so anyway, there's techniques like this which are
Yeah.
they're not necessarily very easy, but they need some commitment to keep them going, but they're effectively essential to make the daily work happen effectively.
Yeah. I think we already mentioned it a bit, but those are, I think they help big time on shaping that foundation we were talking, that people may people will talk on those conferences, they will learn from each other, but the behaviors also of people actually just seeing that there is space for us to do this, we can do
Yep.
it. It's we should not neglect the power of those activities. Yeah.
Is it worth talking a tiny bit about, because this is a big topic, right? But a tiny bit about the more enterprise view onto enabling teams, because you've done quite a bit of work on that, right?
Yeah, we can spend a moment, but I think we already went there a bit, Matthew, which is maybe exactly on that area of the board. So this is a diagram from some years back where I was writing about architecture as an enabling team, and the key idea there, if you follow me a bit to the right, Matthew, is so the problem when bigger organizations start to so you have multiple stream-aligned teams, and I think we are also starting to get into that from team topologies, also trying to bring some more language about this. But typically, when organizations grow, you may have multiple stream-aligned teams effectively building something together, and
like a grouping.
Exactly, like a grouping of stream-aligned teams building something that's bigger than what a single stream-aligned team actually can own. Coming to the example of online shopping that I was working on, you could imagine this first team being the recommendations team, the second team being the search team, and they are all building the inspirational page where people come and try to find things. And if these teams are not aligned or not sort of going in the same direction, what you may have is that they are trying to optimize in very different ways, which eventually may actually be, say, counterproductive to the business, right? So this is a first-hand experience. So searching, trying to optimize for something, recommendations for something else, and then say the conversion through the website and actually the value to the customer is not optimized. So what you can benefit from is to start introducing this idea of groupings, right? So you could imagine now, just for the sake of I'm drawing a little thing around these teams. So this could be a grouping, and effectively they are still stream-aligned teams, but we could, if we start aligning on where are we going, what are the important things for this bigger thing that we are contributing to, how can we make that better?
And it's still a relatively small number of people, right? So it might be 24 people.
No,
people. It's still relatively small. We can meet in the same room. We can share food. Whatever.
These are from. So if you move a bit to the right, so these are from also these examples that are very much inspired by the my bol.com experience. So what we started doing is adding this idea of a product that actually it's something that multiple streamline teams are building or have streams of value that are creating that product. And then here, although I write enabling team, so what you can imagine here is this could be a product architect or someone that's sort of facilitating some cross team alignment. And this is where the idea of leveraging enabling team ideas across those multiple teams and having them facilitating that multi-team alignment, and this becomes very interesting to scale, also to leveraging enabling teams to scale at a larger enterprises. Yeah, so this was something I experienced firsthand, and I think it's for me this is a strategic pattern for many organizations that are scaling, and they are not anymore that just these 4 or 5 teams that can figure things out on their say on their own. We need to add some structure that supports that. But and I think the idea of enabling teams as being not telling the teams what to do, but more on facilitate where things may need some support or some attention.
We can't tell them what to do necessarily, because we don't necessarily know, because the
exactly
business context is changing so quickly, the regulations are changing so quickly, the technology changes so quickly. We have to sense and respond to all of this stuff all the time.
Which
again is like part of the reason why the teams policies kind of exist. Is that teams policies is absolutely expecting technology to shift very, very quickly. We're not assuming fundamentally that the technology is very static and the skills are static. We're assuming that we're going to have to learn a lot of stuff all the time for the foreseeable future on an ongoing basis.
But there is a learning here also, Matthew, when you think about these bigger organizations, which is if you have some people acting as that cross team enabling team in a sense, right? There is a learning that comes also from say company strategy. There are other aspects that are more sort of coming in the long-term vision of the company, that learning sometimes is beneficial from say the single streamline team having awareness of all of that sometimes is a difficult thing to achieve, and by having those people working cross teams just with that mission of helping, of facilitating that, connecting to the bigger mission, that's very powerful in my opinion.
Enabling teams are boundary spanning, aren't they? They're spanning across organizational boundaries deliberately, so that we don't get these awkward silos, whether it's like a hierarchical functional silo or some other kind of silo, whether even arguably a flow-based silo. We're deliberately spanning across that for this extra awareness, so that we don't get stuck in one particular way of doing something, or we don't end up with loads and loads of duplication and so on.
There is a question, Matthew, that is very interesting, and maybe we can just
here we go. Having enablement teams all over. So, is it too expensive at scale? So it depends what you mean by expensive. So if you try to hire people into enabling teams policies enabling teams, and you hire them on a permanent basis, and you're expecting them to stay there forever, then yes, that's probably going to get quite expensive, because then you're having to anticipate beforehand, like how many people you're going to need in that space. That's partly the reason why in the Teams Policies book we talked about, like, sometimes the interaction is temporary between enabling teams and streamline teams, but sometimes the team itself is temporary. And because the enabling team's not building anything itself, that's kind of okay. Like, there's no ongoing stewardship of systems needed, because they're not building anything. So it's fine for it to be temporary.
I think the confusion probably is that I show on the diagram, the previous diagram, I show a lot of enabling teams, but these are practically what I meant there, Jimmy, is that these would be your engineering manager, your product manager. So these are people that today are already in your organization. So what we are saying here is, by having them behaving more like an enabling team, so that's what we are saying. So this is not like basically hiring new enabling teams to be side by side with those people that are already there in the organization. It's more like, how do you shift to have them working more as the behaviors of an enabling team than
It's
necessarily
a behavior and mindset shift,
yeah
isn't it?
yeah
They're behaving in a
that's
different way.
that's
They're
what we
behaving in
mean
the way to
here.
facilitate.
It's not about having more people, like
Yeah.
hiring new people. And I think the example of Matthew is also the example of actually being more what we were talking about cloud, which sometimes it's like you need some experts for a while, and then that the knowledge is not there, and maybe it's not enough for your pioneers on your team to do it. Then okay, maybe this is when we need to hire or to even temporarily hire a consultant to help us on something, for example. Yeah. So, but also there, it's, I think, leveraging the idea of enabling teams is a strategic thing, because you have a mission, and that person comes in and, for example, helps enabling what may be your enabling teams in the future, people that learn about a certain skill, and then your organization knows about that skill or addresses that capability.
The other dimension is like, what does expensive mean? Because if you do the calculation, if you've got 70 teams out of 100 teams all doing the same thing in isolation, all struggling with adopting AI or something like this, that's really expensive. That is really, really expensive. So like, it's actually cheaper to make sure that you've got enabling teams in place to detect that duplication, that waste, and help upskill very rapidly so that those teams are not struggling. So it depends which lens you're using for the cost. If you're using a lens of headcount only, then yeah, I mean, using a lens of headcount only is always going to be a problem. So we need to use lenses of value flow. We need to use lenses of like time kind of throughput and time to value and things like that as well, to help us see where the real costs actually are inside the organization.
Yeah.
I think we're going to wrap up. So enabling teams in a team topology sense never deliver anything. They're not responsible for building things. So that's a really important aspect there. So just to speak to that, Jimmy. So there's enabling teams in team topology's language, and there's enablement more in general, and two are not quite the same. So it's an important thing to bear in mind. Enabling teams will not build anything themselves. They're there to uplift the capabilities in streamlined teams. Instead. It's a really great question. Really crucial.
Yeah, this is very good, because we often get this confusion, and this is very natural, right? So these people typically very capable and very expert, but what we want to avoid, Jimmy, is not creating dependencies on them, right? So they shouldn't go in and fix something like superheroes, leaving it behind, and then the team is not able to move on that. Like, how can we actually detect where some issues are popping up? And then sometimes if it's just one team having something, maybe, as Matthew was saying earlier, if people that know about that could help and just go pair with them and get them to upskill on that, cool. If it's something bigger, then this is where some way of triggering maybe a bigger effort, a group of people that know about that, bringing the external but it tends to be more on demand, right? So we want this to be a pool based thing. So I wouldn't be recommending to have like a group of people waiting for problems to come up, but more we have problems. Okay, do we have that skill in the house? Okay, cool. Let's allow for those people to group and solve something. Otherwise, then maybe this is when we need bring external help.
Cool. So, Eduardo, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
What can we share again here? We can share academy.teamsporties.com. Is a place to go to watch Eduardo's course with Manuel, and it is 15% off. Here, Eduardo 15 off will get you 15% off at least off Eduardo's course, possibly off more. We're not quite sure, but try it and see what happens. And we've got a bigger discount code for whoever puts the most interesting comment in the Teams Bodies community relating to enabling teams. So go ahead, ask an interesting question or comment, or put something in there, maybe some experience from you, and we'll sort you out with we'll sort you out with a bigger discount code there. I think it was either 50% or fully free. We'll confirm that when we reach out. Cool. Thank you, Eduardo. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Matthew.
Enjoy yourself over the holidays and into the new year.
Happy Christmas to everyone.
Yeah.
Bye bye. Take
Happy
care.
Christmas and have a great time, everyone, over into the new year. And the next live stream, I think, is actually towards the end of January. When I'll just share this on the screen, actually. When I'll actually be speaking to Barry O'Reilly, who is the author of Lean Enterprise and Unlearn. I'll actually be joined by Renee Hawkins as well on that. We've just confirmed that today, where we're talking about scaling private equity portfolios with team topologies, like looking at strategies for growth. So super exciting, quite a different topic. But it turns out that team topologies principles and patterns can actually be used for thinking about entire groups of companies, not just inside a single organization. So join us for that. That's on, when is it? It's the 17th of January. 17th of January for that one. So until then, thank you all and see you later. Bye.